Hello everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and this week we are going to be talking about do-while loops. So last week we created a while loop and we played around with a while loop and we built some cool stuff with a while loop. And while loops are pretty easy to understand, right? You have the while condition up here, basically while this condition is met, we're going to continue to do this stuff right here. So this technically would be a while do. Whereas this week we're going to focus on flipping those two things. We're going to have the do up here and the while down here. So we'll do the code first, then check the condition. Honestly, this is basically the same thing. We're just going to flip the order. So again, this is going to be another very easy week. Like I said, I'm trying to just ease you guys into loops a little bit before we get to next week with my favorite loop, the for loop. I love me some for loops, and you'll find out next week why. But this week we're going to do some do-while loops. So let's talk about the while loop again, just so we can review and make sure we all understand exactly what we're doing here. So I have a variable here, n equals 0, and while n equals 0, I want to run this set of code. Now, I want to just put n is 0 on the screen while n is 0, and that's fine. But this piece right here is going to increment n by 1 every single iteration of the loop, which is great because we do not want to have an infinite loop. We don't want a loop where there's no escape value. There's no way for us to break out of the loop. So we have the n++ there to increase n by 1 every iteration of the loop. And then when we're done, when this code runs, it should have, there we go, n is 0. That's what we're looking for. So that is a while loop. Now, how would we flip this around? Well, let's say int n equals 0, and then let's just get rid of all this stuff here, because we're going to create a do-while loop. All right. So what we want to do is say do, okay, and then we put the code that we want to actually do right in here. So do console.writeLine n is 0. And then n++. And then it's angry at me down here because it's expecting something else. And the thing it's expecting is while n equals 0. Okay? So that is a do-while loop. Okay, so we have the do up here first, and then we have the while down here. Okay? Now, if we hit enter and put the while on the next line because you want it to look a little bit nicer and neater, that's fine too. I generally like to keep it up there so that we can remember that this is all one piece, but you can also put it on the next line, that's fine too. And if I run this code, I get n is 0, just like last time. Now, you might be thinking, why are we doing this? There's no difference here. It's basically all we're doing is reversing the order. Well, for this specific code that we just wrote, there is no difference, right? There is no difference whatsoever. But if we were to do something like do n is n, and then we increase n by 1 while n is less than 20, and run that, you can see there's a difference here from the last time, right? Last time when we ran that code as a while loop, we got 20 at the bottom here. Because, and it makes sense if you think about it, because with a while loop, let me scoot this over a little bit. With a while loop, it's checking first. It's checking to see, hey, is n 20? Okay, then run the code. Is n 20? Okay, then run the code. Once n hits 20, it doesn't run the code. Here, we're doing the thing, then checking to see if n is 20. Okay, so if you think about it like this, we start at 0, so we print it. 1, we print. 2, we print. 3, we print. 4, we print. 5, check, we print. 6, check, we print, right? And we keep going. Once we hit 19, once we print 19 here, we increase it to 20. while n is less than 20, well, n is now no longer less than 20 because 20 is not less than 20, so it breaks out of the loop. So we missed that last little piece there. Okay, so there's just a slight difference in logic between the two loops, between a do loop or a while loop and a do while loop. Okay, so it's important to understand the difference between those two. And it all has to do with when the condition is being checked in relation to the rest of the things happening in that loop. All right, so that's a very simple do while loop. We could do something like, let's do, you know what we could do? We could also, yeah, let's do it like this. Let's set this up so that we have a break statement. If n is greater than 5, then we want to break. And then here what we can do is just say while true. Now what we've done here is we've created a do while loop with a break statement. What break does is it essentially just says, hey, get me out of this loop. Once I meet this condition, once I meet the if n is, and I'll put it in here so it's a little easier to see. Once n is greater than 5, then we're going to break. Okay. Now, again, it may be easier just to do it here in the while condition like we did before, but it's important that you understand that break actually does exist in something like this. We can use a break to get out of a loop, just kind of force it out of the loop, right? So let's run this and see what happens. And we get 0 through 5, which is exactly what we're looking for. Now, the while condition here is true. That's a Boolean value. Notice I don't have any Boolean variables in my code at all. Well, this Boolean value just basically says while the loop is able to keep looping. So while the loop itself is true, then we will keep looping the loop, right? If you use a true value in the while condition, then you absolutely have to have a break somewhere in the loops or it becomes an infinite loop, okay? Easy, easy stuff. Now, I want to make it a little bit more difficult because that's my job. Make it a little bit more difficult for you. I want to talk to you about nested loops, okay? Now, nested loops are something you want to avoid as much as you can. Smaller programs like this, we can write a nested loop and it won't be an issue. But if you have larger programs, you're exponentially increasing the amount of memory and the amount of the speed at which a program can function if you nest loops within each other. But with a small program like this, we can do nested loops. I just want to show you that nested loops are possible. Now, some of you may be thinking, I don't even know what nested means. You've already lost me. Well, I'm about to teach you. So, nested, if you think about you remember those Russian nesting dolls where there's a doll that kind of looks like a bowling pin, and then you open up the doll, you pull it apart, and there's a smaller doll on the inside that looks just like it. You pull that apart, and there's a smaller doll, an even smaller doll inside that. You keep going down until you get a little baby doll on the inside. Those are Russian nesting dolls, right? They're called nesting dolls because there's a smaller doll inside of a bigger doll. Right? So nesting really just means putting something inside of something else. So we're going to be nesting a do while loop inside of another do while loop. Okay? So let's say let's do console write line. That looks good to me. Let's get rid of this here. And let's set this condition to be while n is less than 2. Okay, so that's a do while loop that we already understand. But let's do, Oh, you know what we could do? Yeah, let's do this. Ooh, we're getting saucy. All right, so let's say int I equals n. That's easy. And then, so basically we're going to take the value of I, or we're going to create a new variable called I, and we're going to add to it the value of n. And then on the inside, we're going to create another do inside of our do while. So we have a do and we have another do on the inside. And we'll say console dot write line I is I. Okay. And then we'll increment I plus plus. And then the while on this statement is going to be while, say, I is less than 2. Okay, so we have a do while statement inside of a do while statement. So take a moment to think about what you think it will actually print on my screen when I run this code. All right, what do you think is going to be first, second, third, fourth, fifth? What do you think is actually going to print on my screen? And when you have a pretty good picture of that, compare that with what we're about to see when I hit start. Okay, so what we have here, let's break it down. We have n is 0. So we did this, we printed n is 0, which is great. We changed the value of I to equal n, so I is now 0. We added 1 to n. Then we hit this do while loop. We printed the value of 0, which is I is 0. We added 1 to I. We're still in the loop, so we come back, I is 1. We added 1 to I, and guess what? It breaks out now because I is now 2, and 2 is not less than 2. So we break out of this loop, and we come back up here, and we say, okay, so now n is 1, right? And then we're going to come back here, and it goes back into the loop again, and it prints I is 1 again, and breaks out of this loop again. But now n is 2, so we can break out of the parent loop. Okay. Now again, this is a little complicated. Let's make bigger numbers here to see if it makes it just a little bit more clear. Let's set this instead of 2. Let's set it to 10, and then let's see what happens. Whew, that's crazy. Okay, look. Let's take a look. N 0, I 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then we break out of the loop. Now I is 10 forever. Well, it's now I is 10. Then we go back up here to n. Then we come and then n is set. So whatever the value of n is becomes the value of I. So then once n is now 1, I, if we look down here, becomes 1 again. So we print 1 through 9. And then n is 2. And I is also 2. And because of that second loop, we go 2 through 9. And we just keep doing that until that iteration, until this loop gets smaller and smaller, because I keeps increasing, or yeah, n increases as well as I increases. Okay, that probably didn't clear anything up at all. But, and nested loops can be a bit confusing. You will use them often when you're talking about things like 3D arrays and you're trying to iterate through each index of an array, but it's a 3D array, so you're, anyway. Nested loops are a possible thing. You can use nested loops in your code. Just know that you can put a do while loop inside of a do while loop. You can also put a while loop inside of a do while loop. You can put a while loop inside of a while loop. You can put a do while loop inside of a while. Go crazy, go nuts. Try doing all kinds of different things, whatever it is that you'd like to use. And remember, if you have a break statement, you can break out of the loop at any point. Okay, so that's do while loop. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to give you some time to do the quiz and do the assignment and practice a little bit more with a do while loop. Again, we haven't changed much from last week. I'm just using the do while loop to add a little bit more of loop theory. And next week, it's going to get fun. It's going to get crazy. We're going to talk about the for loop. So I will see you then.